Well, ladies and gentlemen, some very interesting news on the horizon today. And I must be honest and say, when I was reading the news today, the only thing anybody really seems to be talking about is the decline of the ANC, because the ANC's decline is accelerating. But before we get onto the main story of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help. And if you'd like to support the work that I do here, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. The link is in the description box below. So let's get on to the main news stories of today. The first news story is around the feeling that South Africans have in regards to their safety. According to a Stats SA survey, the general feeling is that South Africans feel that safety in the country is declining. Now, the actual survey, titled the Governance, Public Safety and Justice Survey of 2024-2025, was conducted by Stats South Africa between April 2024 and March 2025. Making it the largest comprehensive snapshot of public sentiment and crime experience nationwide. So what actually did the report say? Well, in terms of crime, around 1.5 million incidents of housebreaking occurred in that period, affecting 1.1 million households, equating to around 5.7% of all households. So 5.7% of households have been subjected to burglary. Burglary and household break-ins remains the most prevalent household crime. The percentages of households affected climbed from 10% in 2020 to what is effectively now 13.2%. Now, this 13.2% is a drop from last year, which was at 13.5%. Now, theft of personal property, your cell phone, your wallet, that kind of mugging type theft, also rose from 2.1 million victims in 2020 to what is now 2.8 million victims in 2024. Now, street robbery remains the second most common crime experience in South Africa, further emphasizing persistent vulnerability of the average public. And to that, I would say, if you're not already armed, you need to go get yourself a firearm. Now, in terms of daytime safety, the number of individuals who felt that it was safe to walk around their neighborhoods dropped from 85% in 2020 to around 81% in 2024. So generally, people don't feel it's as safe to walk around in the daytime as they used to, but only by 4%. Now, nighttime safety remains really low, with only 36.1% of people feeling it's safe to walk alone after dark, and this is as of 2024-2025. Now, believe it or not, that this is actually an increase. It was around 2020, around 34.9%. So there has been a marginal increase in the number of individuals that feel it's safe to walk after dark. Overall, the net result of the survey is that the number of people taking precautions rose from 39.9% in 2023 to 43.3% in 2024. So most people don't want to be a victim of crime, and so they've installed burglar doors or other physical reinforcements. Of those who were surveyed, 79.9% reported that they then felt safer after they had installed all of the precautions. Now, a big thing that's missing from the survey is I would love to know how many of these individuals arm themselves, because that itself is not included in the survey itself. And I feel that that's a very big lost opportunity. In any case, some interesting stats. Do let me know what you think of those in the comment section below. Now, moving on then to other stats, and this is obviously the stats around the ANC's collapsing polls. Now, Fikile Mbalula affirmed that the party will nominate individuals who are ethical, capable, and people-centered for the 2026 municipal elections, and he said that they were going to do this in order to restore public trust and bolster governance credibility. This is obviously after the numbers showed that the ANC was crashing in the polls. So this itself shows us that the ANC understands very well that the actual problem is the ANC, and it's around public trust. No one trusts the ANC, and no one feels that their government is credible, because it's not. It's full of looting. Now, despite all of this, Mbalula feels that the party can be turned around. And so he publicly endorsed the statements made by the former minister, Naledi Pandor, who lamented the party, once revered in her words, is now viewed by many citizens with disdain, horror, and shame. But according to her, this underscores internal awareness of the ANC's failing prestige. Boom. Others have started to suggest that this sounds very much like she's positioning herself to maybe take over from Cyril. What a disaster that would be. In any case, Pandor called for a renewed focus on ethical leadership, accountability, and intergenerational cooperation. So this is basically the younger people cooperating with the older people. But the problem is, no one thinks that the ANC anymore has any form of ethical leadership because there has never been any form of accountability in anything that it does. For the ANC to keep saying to us, trust me, I'll change, it's a bit like that husband that beats his wife and then says, don't worry, I'll change, I'll stop beating you, but you make me beat you, so it's actually your fault. That's what the ANC does to the public. And the public are sick of it. I must admit, they are proper sick of it. Even the once loyal voter base of the ANC is sick of it, because they can see their material living circumstances decline. In any case, Pandor stressed that leadership without tangible solutions fails the public amidst the ANC's post-2024 decline and governance challenges. But you see, again, this is the problem. The ANC doesn't have any solutions. They've been in government for over 30 years. They don't have any solutions left. They don't have any cadres left. All of them are tainted. All of the policies have failed. There is nothing else that the ANC can offer the country. And why the ANC doesn't understand that, I'll never know. It's just tone deaf. Everybody else is talking about the ANC's decline, apart from the ANC, who understands they're in decline but feel that they can reverse it. And to that, I would say, no, you can't. Now, moving swiftly on, an executive at Sanlam and the deputy chair of the B20 Employment and Education Task Force wrote a piece reflecting both business insights and global economic engagements via the G20 mechanisms. Now, the core of his piece, if you want to call it that, is that according to him, South Africa's G20 presidency should be used to align business and government agendas. Now, he suggested that they should implement policies like flexible working initiatives, reskilling initiatives, social security coverage for gig workers, and tech-enabled job matching platforms, with the idea being to target groups such as women and digital-driven economies, AI in the gig economy. Now, according to him, the reason he said all of this is because he suggested that South Africa itself should move beyond its normal rhetoric and move to a more measured, inclusive job growth model. He said that we should leverage the G20 and the B20 platforms to translate commitments into real worldwide economic empowerment across demographics. Now, how exactly is this going to be done? He didn't say. But really what this shows you is that even executives out of Sanlam, when they start to interact with forums such as the G20 and the B20, they just end up saying the same old globalist, tried and tested bull rubbish that doesn't actually mean anything. And again, it shows you that we have a real disconnect between what actually grows economies and what is just lip service on a global scale. Because in my opinion, that's exactly where we are with global leadership. Many of them parrot all of the global talking points, but none of them actually know how to create jobs. Now, talking of not actually knowing how to create jobs, the new employment equity reporting rules, which are due to come in at the 1st of September, will impact companies with over 50 employees. These companies, now classed as what they refer to as designated employers, must submit Employment Equity (EE) reports underneath the amended Employment Equity Amendment Act. So for the first time, sector-specific numerical representation targets set by the Minister of Employment and Labour are mandatory and need to be met by 2030. Now, these targets will cover race, gender, disability, representation, and must align industry-wide. Now, employers can justify grounds for non-compliance in some cases, and some employers contest the act. Now, the DA has filed a court challenge in April 2025, arguing that the rigid race-based quotas impede inclusive growth. But in any case, the government seems to be completely tone deaf and still says that industry must begin to follow these rules from the 1st of September. Yeah, I can see this being a complete disaster in a country that's already declining and has rapid deindustrialization. The ANC's answer is to, well, tinker and tinker and tinker and just destroy everything it touches. It cannot help itself, which is exactly why no one wants to vote for these morons. Now, in terms of the US tariffs, as you know, Trump imposed a 30% reciprocal tariffs on South African goods effective of the 8th of August. Now, government officials have warned that this could jeopardize around 30,000 jobs, particularly in sectors like the automotive and agricultural sectors, with the country already facing high unemployment. As you know, it's 32.9% overall and 46.1% in terms of youth unemployment. Now, you'll also know that the government launched a support program, which is the Export Support Desk, to help businesses pivot to new markets, and prioritized a financial support package to shield vulnerable industries. We haven't actually seen many details around this, and no doubt if it's anything like the COVID reliefs, they'll all be tied to some bull rubbish, because that's how the government works. In any case, Ramaphosa says that he is continuing to engage in diplomatic negotiations, including having calls with President Trump. He says that trade teams continue talks, though he admits that there has been limited traction thus far. Now, South Africa has argued that the tariffs were based on inaccurate trade data, with average tariffs on US goods being much lower, and so he says this idea of reciprocal trade tariffs is actually, well, according to him, wrong. Now, the reason this is all important is that we're basically just repeating everything we already know. But if you read between the lines, effectively the trade deal with the US has gone nowhere. We're no further forward with a trade deal with the US to alleviate the pain from these reciprocal tariffs. So the reciprocal tariffs are still in place because we don't have a deal. And the question I would really like to know is, well, what attempts are being made to negotiate a new one? Because reading between the lines of the articles and the press statements coming out of government, the answer is, well, nothing. It seems like the entire thing is stalled. Do let me know what you think in the comment section below. Now, moving swiftly on then to some final news articles. And the first one actually is around inclusive economic growth. Now, according to a daily investor analyst, they suggested that growth could exceed 3% annually if South Africa pursued urgent reforms in labor policy, logistics, electricity, and infrastructure. Now, these policy shifts are all referenced in Operation Vulindlela, which is an initiative set up by Ramaphosa to address economic bottlenecks as a blueprint for systematic improvement. But I'm reminded that this operation was first put in place when Ramaphosa first took his position as president of the country. And to date, if this program has been in place for over 10 years, and our average growth rate sits at a whole 0.8% annually over the past decade, this has to raise the question as to what reforms have occurred underneath the operation so far. Because it would appear very much so that nothing has occurred, and that the great reformer, the great businessman, Ramaphosa, has done nothing. In any case, the daily investor analyst says that investor-friendly reforms could revitalize confidence and attract capital, but delays and uncertainty are dampening outlooks. And that in itself is actually an important point to note. Going back to the previous issue of the tariffs, whilst the government dilly-dallies, whilst Operation Vulindlela sits there doing nothing for 10 years, capital is not going to invest in the country because it makes it look like the government has no interest in growing the economy, because they don't. They're too busy looting, which is exactly why, according to the MSCI index, investor confidence is faltering in South Africa due to policy delays and structural weaknesses. Now, since October 2024, foreign investors have pulled out approximately $3.7 billion from South African equities, the longest continuous outflow in 5 years. And again, they are all highlighting issues which include policy uncertainty, sluggish reform, macroeconomic pressures, which are all making investors question long-term prospects for their returns. And this is all due to ANC misgovernance. So long story short, ladies and gentlemen, we need to vote these people out. And once we voted them out, we need to court-martial all those caught looting the fiscus dry. Probably all of them at this rate. In any case, those are just my opinions. Do let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until tomorrow, bye.